Of all the unexamined assumptions and criteria upon which the world has based the daily life of mankind, the Gregorian calendar is by far the greatest and most profoundly unquestioned instrument of control ever perpetuated upon the people of Earth. The use of this calendar is an artificial way of counting time. There is no logic or scientific relation between the exact length of the year used by the Gregorian calendar to measure and divide a year. Although the calendar for the Mayan, Hindu, Judaic, Islamic, and Chinese people remain today, the Gregorian calendar measures daily affairs.
Well, my understandings of the Gregorian calendar was that it was instituted around the 1500s, somewhere in there, by Pope Gregory. And the idea was behind it to be able to govern specific days primarily for commerce and to look at the world in terms of delivery schedules and trying to organize our civilization in order to be productive. Production is the key to any nation's ability to survive. The problems that we have with it is the days of the calendar are filled with days of celebration, but not to reach into our heart, but to buy something, to consume. We are tax-producing units, and with the Gregorian calendar, the way it's been set up, and because our language is not spiritual, we are constantly looking outside of ourselves for all of the answers.
Our calendar here, for instance, the Gregorian calendar, it's organized from the birth of Jesus, the presumed birth of Jesus. But there is something more profound about it. If you look at the Gregorian calendar, the basic idea is that we revolve around the sun year by year, and it counts the number of revolutions that the earth has made around the sun since this birth of Jesus. And we think, okay, that's the only way, that's a natural way of counting time, that's a good way of counting time. This whole way of basing a calendar on this endlessly, more or less endlessly repeated revolution of the earth around the sun, it fosters a worldview where life is like a constant going on a never-ending carousel or merry-go-round, and life is not going anywhere.
From 1981, when I first encountered the sacred count of days of the Maya called the sacred Solkan, the 260-day cycle, I had a measure from which I began to question where did I get my calendar and where did I learn to tell time from a watch? Because as a woman, I never really trusted the Gregorian calendar. I knew that when I went to see my doctor and he told me when my babies were going to be born, that I knew it wasn't accurate because there is a different timing frequency that is contained in the body of woman, which is our natural timing frequency. The Gregorian calendar is an irregular measure of time. And knowing the Mayan time cycle, I could begin to understand that the current Gregorian calendar that is now the standard for the whole planet was actually an instrument of control. And actually the Gregorian calendar was codified in 1582 by Pope Gregory XIII. And it's very interesting when you begin to think about the fact that we're all living on the Pope's calendar. And so my discovery of the timing frequencies in relationship to the Maya count and the Gregorian calendar was a discovery of our need to return to natural time, to trust our internal timing.
So as we look at time, whether on a calendar or within the cycles of the universe, the cycles of the solar, the lunar, all these different aspects that we actually calculate time with, as indigenous people, we've tried to go in consistency and balance with this. The Gregorian calendar, of course, was developed, I think, partly by religion. Religion was created for the convenience of man to control the populace, to gain power and wealth, and to otherwise control people as how they are affected in their beliefs, but mainly, I think, to have them do what the leaders and what they wanted. And like, again, I think it was a lot about control.
The Gregorian calendar is codified after the doctrine of discovery, which assumed that the Christian church had the power to take any land owned by non-Christian peoples. This doctrine led right into the codification of the calendar, allowing for a method to control people for economic and political measurement of time. The historical context in which this calendar became a fixed standard could be the greatest manipulation of our time.
Was it intended that way? I can speculate and say yes, it was. And I have to look only at the beginnings of Christianity that came together to bring the warlords together, and then later it was reconstituted into Roman Catholicism in Africa with the intent of giving the Roman Empire a book of authority and a church behind it. Okay? Very, very deceptive. They did not succeed by taking the philosophy into the rural areas, because there the people had a strong attachment to the earth. They took it to the cities where they were successful, where people were suffering, where people were being used, and they gave them a promise. So that way it's successful, and today we are a world of consumption.
European power, prompted by an acquisitive material greed, created the church's need to gather all souls under its cross. No one could receive the blessings of Christianity without first accepting the Gregorian calendar. Is it possible that since then we have merely been living an era in faith and time?
We don't think about it, but we're using a calendar, the Gregorian calendar, that constantly tells us that life is not going anywhere. We're just on this ongoing revolutions year after year after year. And so it tells us a worldview where life has no purpose, and creation has no purpose, evolution has no purpose. It's just about this endless repeated cycle of the earth around the sun.
But the thing is, what the Gregorian calendar and the 1260 frequency can create in our minds or even in our biological cycles? Well, because we're living in a world that is rushing all the time, people is getting stressed because they don't have not even time for their own families, and that is what we think that is wrong about the 1260. The ancient people, they were living in a natural cycles, not being aware about, oh, I need to be in this specific place at this time, because they were following natural cycles. But us, our society, our world right now, everybody is following this unnatural timing frequency, what we call the 1260. And that's the key to understand the Mayan code. The Mayan code means to understand what is time. That is the key.
We may think that the Gregorian calendar is simply a logical way to divide our time, and that the mechanical clock allows humans to gather promptly at an appointed hour. But have we ever asked ourselves if these ideas negatively affected the way we live our lives? Do you think this Gregorian calendar affects the human psyche?
I think by osmosis it certainly has, for the reason I'm telling you. We use the calendar today to figure out when to pay our bills, whose birthday it is. to buy something, when to go get groceries, when our bills are due. That's not what the calendar was meant for.
We should go deeper when we look at these things. We should realize that a calendar is not that arbitrary a choice as we might say. It is something that we take it for granted, and it really very profoundly influences our worldview, what we think life is about.
All authority granted to the Gregorian calendar is actually an allegiance to the late Christian artificial time. The authority of this artificial time is held by the Vatican, and the Vatican is given full political protection by the major Western powers. In Europe itself, the Gregorian calendar succeeded at the precise moment when the final mechanization of time was being achieved. By the 1600s, the 12-month year and the 60-minute hour had become the standard of time. And this was a final codification of the third dimensional timing frequency of the 1260 of the old world. Needless to say, the authority and impact of this artificial timing frequency was never questioned.
In the year 1989, I made a visit with my husband to Geneva, Switzerland. And we were in the Museum of Time in Geneva when we had a very profound realization. We had been living the Mayan sacred count of days, the 260-day cycle, since 1981. We had been studying the principles of Mayan time science. So when we were in the Museum of Time, it was possible for us to take that lens that we had learned from working with the Mayan time sense to see the Museum of Time in Geneva in such a way that we felt it should be renamed the Museum of Mechanical Time. Because quite literally, we were able to observe how a little metal ball dropping in space was the beginning of the mechanical clock. And now we live in a world that is dominated by clock time. We're always rushing. And clock time divides time into minutes, into hours, into seconds, and now we have cesium clocks. We have timing getting more and more precise down to micro, nanoseconds, when in reality, time is a very subjective thing.
So as we keep in balance with it be whether our planting seasons, the solar calendar, the lunar calendar, the cycles of creation, which are the seed we plant in our mother, the seed we plant in the woman, has to do with cycles. She goes through a monthly cycle. That is the cleansing part of this cycle. So even to the basis of life, that has to do with a timeline cycle, which is natural in all forces of life. Whether it goes down to the seasons, the tilt of the earth, how it rotates around the axis, to the gravitational field, there's many different ways that we understand this.
Great thinkers like Galileo and Kepler were persecuted by the church in order to make them subjects of the church's position on science. So it came to pass that virtually all men of science were forced to accept without question the power of the church.
I believe that modern science, because it had used the Gregorian calendar and the clock for the basis of most of its experiments, needs to be totally reevaluated in terms of natural timing frequency. So when you have an artificial standard of measure that doesn't reflect the human being, you get this system of scientific objectification, as if you can prove scientifically that something is absolutely true the way it is. This is a very extreme point of view, and in fact, through human life and through the mystery of life, we come to understand that there is so much that we cannot know, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. In other words, we cannot know everything, and there is humor when you think about science trying to prove an objective reality, when in fact every scientist lives by his or her subjective reality.
To really work on this first, we have to work on our integrity, know who we are as human, as spiritual, as mental human beings, as emotional, as astral travelers. Once we are into this multidimensionality, our concept between the good and evil and the polarities change into unity with the divine and into this consciousness. And only with this consciousness we will be able to access not only those portals, but also that wisdom, that knowledge that goes beyond anything we have ever dreamt of. But we are here to retrieve.
Since its conception, the Gregorian calendar became the only way to think about time. We must contemplate what the effects are of living in this unawareness and reconsider history, because it has always been manipulated by those in power. We must open our consciousness and ask, what if? Yes, what if we lived under a different standard of time?
A calendar is a way you measure time. When you use an irregular calendar that's completely illogical, and yet you claim that your scientific discovery is completely logical and objective, you have a clash. And at this point, the power holders will always want to rewrite history to serve their own means. But in fact, the principle of indigenous or being native to a land, all human beings have an indigenous part and then a part that has been affected by modern 1260 time, which has been the absolute control that the Gregorian calendar has played in bringing people into this world where time is money, everything goes faster and faster. We've created machines, the computer, all of it. All of these technologies have shown us that there actually is something greater than what we can control. Because in fact, at this time, with the use of cell phones and with the use of the internet, information is now simultaneous across the planet. And because of that, there are changes going on that none of us can individually see happening. And so we may become extremely discouraged and think that the world is totally going to hell and we'll never get out of this war situation. But what's really going on is there's a whole other frequency that is pulling us forward from the future.
There were many effects. I think not only what it did was create an imbalance within our frequencies and the level that we exist as. You know, the Mother Earth is the one that gives us life. The Mother Earth is the one that sustains us, and every aspect that goes out of balance with that, it affects us, not only our mental or physical, but also our emotional state. So when people come in and try to control other people through religion or values and stuff like that, I think it has an eternal effect on us.
In the early 20th century, B.F. Skinner wrote about the effect upon mankind due to pure technological change. He said it would drive people to insanity. We can ask the Mayan people, the Australian Aborigine, the Amazon forest dwellers, and the Native Americans what happened to their concept of time. And we all soon realize that it is in the interest of those who are in positions of power to eliminate it and replace it with a calendar convenient to their needs.
And I saw how there were so many ways in which people restricted themselves by this artificial timing frequency. And it actually starts when, certainly in the United States, when you entered school, you were immediately given a calendar and a watch to learn how to tell time. But you weren't asked what time you wanted to actually live by. So there was a huge assumption made from the beginning of school that you were going to follow the Gregorian calendar and the clock.
I think we only need to look at pre-communist Russia. One of the things that Lenin had to deal with in pre-communist Russia was that education was so poor in Russia that it was going to take a long time to educate people. Well, Stalin succeeded with it because he understood that production was the key to being a powerful country. But as well as that, he had to educate people. Okay? So education has always been an element that has always been governed by the rich. Okay? The trustees of any university anywhere or any school district anywhere are generally the leaders in the community. Now, do they try to keep us ignorant on purpose? Possibly, because we might stop spending money. Are we tax-producing units? Substantially, yes, because that's the way a country can borrow money when it doesn't have money, like the United States went bankrupt in 1933. Okay? But they can still leverage on the basis of how many people we have here and how many we might produce. Okay? That's why we can be in debt the way we are. So, I would have to say that overall, particularly the church, for example, at one time the world studied chemistry, studied physics, and it also studied alchemy. Well, they took alchemy out. Why? Because it's the first step to transmutation, to changing things.
Whether it's a conspiracy or not that has kept the Gregorian calendar in existence for so long, it still is a liberating experience for people to see that through the Mayan calendar that we are part of a divine plan. And actually, I would like to add in this context, we are part of a divine plan that will lead to the crumbling of a lot of currently existing hierarchies. So obviously there is a great interest amongst certain people in powerful positions not to have this widely known, or to distort it or deliver it in a false way that makes it non-accessible to people.
For the Maya, it is very clear that time is a fourth dimensional law, and that the fourth dimension governs the third dimension. But as long as we are living in a 1260 old world, we will continue to be a materialistic society that lacks understanding of the Mayan concept of time. According to the Mayans, we are time. Time resides within the human biological species, which follows a natural cycle of time. For the Mayans, time does not change. All things change in time. Time is not in motion, but we move through time as our consciousness moves from one event to another. And by time we exist, all in eternal existences. Even though we appear separate in time, we still are one in all existent time. The universe, from its most minute component to the whole system itself, is governed by a constant, a frequency that keeps everything in order, in balance, and synchronized in harmony. This single timing frequency was codified as the sacred calendar of the Maya.
Yeah, the sacred calendar is totally based on nature. In our ways, we have forgotten that connection with Mother Earth. So the sacred calendar, the purpose is connect with nature again. Can you imagine a humanity that's honoring nature every day? This will create enormous changes in the consciousness of our people. That's why it's important.
The Maya calendar can facilitate a better connection between us and nature, because when we study the Maya calendar and we follow the Maya calendar, we can come into closer relationship with the cycles of nature. Mayan time philosophy is based upon observing the cycles in nature, everything from plant growth to the birth and life cycle of a human being, to the greater cycles in the outer universe, the planets, and the great cycle of precession, this great 26,000-year precessional cycle. And the Tzolk'in, the 260-day calendar, is the key to all these different domains of human experience. So when we place ourselves into right rhythm, right relationship with this calendar, then we just immediately come into better, more intimate union with nature and with other human beings.
I think that in having a time system of measurement like the calendar helps us to keep up with a steady evolution growth pattern that we may have. I think that in a cycle, just for example, of a seed being planted, it sprouting, it growing, it being fructious, the pollen and insemination, and then creating the seed again that's going to be planted one more time, that's a timeline. I think that sometimes we get caught up into having specifics because the weather does change. You know, the effects that we have had on the earth is creating global warming. You know, the polar caps are melting. There's floods and all this stuff coming. There's more earthquakes. So, you know, that cycle is going to change. And I think that, that we're affected by not only our limitations that we give ourselves, but also we're affected by our actions. And having a time frame, I think, is just to remind us like how things are going to come to pass, and maybe the prophecies and all that are saying, you know, to quit consuming yourself with the material world. There's also the spiritual and the emotional and the physical sense that you got to take care of to create that balance. So those calendars and those timelines, I think, are there to keep us on track and to keep us going. And if it has to do with evolution, then that's a system of growth too as well.
We are all now in a time shift. This is the moment to wake up and hear the message of the Mayan people and sing the new song of enlightenment, so we, the children of the earth, can return to nature. It is time for the 1260 Old World civilization of materialistic greed and mechanized life process to end.
I can only hope my Mayan people can really get in touch and follow the sacred timekeeping. There is only a few elders that are doing that, and I honor them so much because we are doing now a labor of recuperation of all this ancient knowledge. As I'm telling you, this is a part of the evolution of consciousness. And you have to remember the Mayan people of now have been slaves, let's call it like that, for the last 500 years. So it's not only a social revolution, but also a spiritual revolution. And I see many of the old Mayans being reincarnated in the youngsters coming now with new energies. So I see a very special revolution of people getting more and more in touch with Mayan spirituality. In Guatemala, we are allowed to do ceremonies only if we have special permissions from the ministry. I think we as Mayans should be allowed to do our ceremonies without having to ask the government for permission. We are asking for permission to the Nahuales, the guardians of the portals in the sacred cities. Do you understand what I mean? So it's a total revolution of consciousness that we are working on with the Mayans of today. So it's a total awakening, but it is also being represented in the rest of humanity. Because if we start to evolve into all that we are learning to be as evolved human beings, what is happening now is that we need a different time frame to be able to access those states of consciousness.
They were synchronized with natural time. Natural time that brings into your life respect, love, tolerance, and understanding of the evolution of time, but as consciousness, because time is of consciousness. That is the key. That is the beauty of the Mayan calendar. And they developed this system to awareness the importance to understand natural cycles.
The Maya understood a system of time reckoning that was based on cyclical time and how everything repeats itself and is codified into cycles upon cycles of time. The current way at that time that we were looking at time from the Gregorian perspective or from the clock perspective is that time is a line and that we're always dragging the past forward and we're always wondering what the future will bring. But the Maya had a concept of the zavuya, which is to actually circulate time both from the past and the future into the ever-present now, which is actually where we all dwell. We in a physical body hold a time-space point which is always based in the now. So the Maya had a profound understanding of how to measure time in the now.
The beauty of the Maya calendar, especially for Western philosophy or Westerners, is that it provides a sacred dimension to experience. There's a certain quality or characteristic of life in the modern world in which we are disconnected from the sacred dimension. And it's the indigenous wisdom, very nicely and beautifully exemplified in the Maya calendar, that can provide a doorway for us to reconnect with the sacred in our own lives.
The sacred calendar is the vehicle that will allow us to think like the advanced culture that existed in the Western world before the arrival of the Europeans. By retrieving the Mayan count of days after centuries of oppression of its indigenous population, we may recover a piece of the puzzle of the Mayan knowledge. The sacred count of days provides the key to the unification of the widely varying perspective in today's world on what it means to be a human being, and gives us a tool for aligning our intuition with our individual and cosmic purposes.
The long count calendar is not a calendar system that is still followed among the Maya. The 260-day calendar is, and that's really the core building block. But this long count calendar that gives us the 2012 end date, it seems to have been put in place about 2,100 years ago by this early Maya culture called the Izapan civilization. At the site of Izapa, we have carved monuments, and we have orientations that bring in this rare galactic alignment that culminates in 2012. The alignment of the December solstice sun with the dark rift in the Milky Way, right at the crossroads where the Milky Way crosses the ecliptic. This rare alignment takes place only once every 26,000 years. And what I found in looking at the carved monuments of Izapa is that we have encoded here at the site the perennial wisdom associated with this astronomical alignment. It's not just about astronomy. There's a prophecy, and there's spiritual teachings. And I think of Izapa as being sort of like ground zero of the 2012 prophecy, and a clarity of bringing back to consciousness this original teaching about 2012. I think it's very important to go right to the source of the revelation.
Today, modern science is considered the norm, and scientists judge the level of advancement of Mesoamerican cultures by modern standards. If we are to recognize the true value of the ancient scientific knowledge, we must evaluate the quality of modern knowledge using the ancient knowledge as a standard.
My ancestors were masters in the time journeying, so they knew exactly even what is happening now. You have to think about this civilization as one of very advanced human beings with great consciousness. I can tell you that the sacred calendar is not something that you can see in the different depictions of dates we have. You cannot see that there is a beginning, a prototype of how it started. From the oldest date is always keeping the way of the date. That can only prove to us that the Mayan calendar is not even Mayan. If you see the codex that is called the Dresden Codex, because it's in the Museum of Dresden, but actually was found in the area of Petén in Guatemala, there are depictions of multitude of different persons from the stars, star people. Yeah? So you can see this civilization was friends with this higher consciousness. That's why we haven't been able to read all the messages they left for us, because we still don't have the level of consciousness that will allow us to understand the concepts. We have grown a lot in the technology and the science to understand many things, but the level of consciousness that will understand the messages of the time travelers, This is a different consciousness. Now humanity is reaching a level where we are starting to be interested, because the sacred calendar is a map of time.
Only from such a point of view of departure will we realize that humanity has lost access to an indispensable part of its ancient heritage, a heritage that has either been distorted or not understood correctly. And this very lack of insight about the ancient knowledge through their sacred calendar has created a global imbalance. We have consciously shunned half the world's knowledge.
Well, Izapa is a very special place because it is the place where the 2012 calendar was invented. And the spiritual message that's preserved on the carved monuments of Izapa are basically the same message that we find in the hero twin creation myth. So basically the carved monuments are portraying that same teaching that we find in the Popol Vuh. And in that story, it's basically, in a nutshell, it's basically the relationship between Seven Macaw, who is the false ruler, and One Hunahpu, who is the consciousness that's been reborn, transformed by coming back into right relationship with the true cosmic source and center. So this dynamic between Seven Macaw and One Hunahpu, and how the hero twins facilitate the demise of Seven Macaw and the rebirth of their father, One Hunahpu, it's basically the perennial universal teaching about the relationship between the limited ego consciousness and the divine, unlimited, true consciousness. And the spiritual message is that we have an opportunity here at the end of the cycle to sacrifice or surrender the illusions that keep us fixated to that limited state of consciousness that is ruled by the seven macaws of the world. Seven macaw being the vain and false ego, you know, the ego out of control. And you know, ego's always been a fiction of convenience, but at some point in the great cycles of time, humanity lost their connection with the true eternal consciousness, which is our birthright. It resides at the core of our hearts. And when that connection got severed, then ego sort of got deputized to take over that function. And then things kind of just went haywire from there.
But if we really want to know more and how the Mayan count of days functions, we must ask the Mayan elders. Among the living Maya themselves, many are educating their young in the old ways. At the core of the teachings is the sacred count of days.
If you are born into the energy of Kesh, you are a person of service. If you are Balam, the Jaguar, you have authority. Depending on what sign you were born in, you can educate a child to take out their potential and their possibilities and to develop their talents also.
The main path provided by the Mayan count of days is thus toward oneness, unity, compassion, and love. And this is charted at the level of consciousness. The Mayan count of days functions as a metaphysical map of the evolution of consciousness and records how spiritual time flows, providing a new science of divine time. By using the Mayan count of days correctly, as a spiritual device, we will have a greater understanding of the nature of conscious evolution throughout human history, how it provides the concrete steps we can take to align ourselves with this growth toward enlightenment.
I believe that the Maya left us clues that they really were galactic travelers to this planet, that anyone who has visited the sacred sites of the Maya soon realizes that, wow, something was going on here that we don't understand because of the profound harmony in the placement of the temples, Chichen Itza, the ability to capture the equinoxes with that beautiful serpent going down the pyramid. Those are all signs that there is something going on that we don't understand.
The year 2012 in particular will be required for an enlightened state to settle in a number of individuals who may not have been fully prepared for it. The ancient traditions throughout the planet all point in the same direction: a timeless period, enlightened state of cosmic consciousness. We may start asking ourselves if we really need a calendar that divides people and time, or if we need one that helps us to attain a state of enlightenment. It is time that we use a calendar that helps us to align ourselves to the divine.
The prophecy for 2012 again has to do with what's going to be happening at the end of the age. And it has to do with this deity, Seven Macaw. He's the vain and false ruler. He is dead set to deceive humanity, to try to keep humanity from feeling their connection with their true eternal selves. So at the end of the cycle, Seven Macaw, or vain egoism, will be ruling and ruining the planet. That's kind of the first part of the Mayan prophecy, and it comes from the Maya creation mythology. The second part is that we, or Seven Macaw, can sacrifice his attachment to the illusions that make him think that he is the true center. Ego is not the true center of the universe. We live in a world, in the Western society, where we believe that our individual identities, our egos, is all that there is. That's a big illusion, and that's what keeps us from feeling connected with our true eternal selves. So the second part of the prophecy is that we can sacrifice those illusions, and we can transform our egos, make our egos transparent in a sense, so that the true light, the true eternal light of our eternal selves can shine through.
If you look at all prophecies and all religions, is that it's important to understand that we treat each other with respect, that we can actually have love in our hearts, in our life. You know, as far as we have been as human beings, you know, it's all been a mental attitude, materialism. You know, as we emerged from the underworld, they say that there was 4 brothers. We, as the indigenous people of the Americas, stayed here on this land. The other brothers went and left. But to understand it even better, we were all here together at one time. Now, as our brothers come back and we all share a multitude of gifts, of blessings, a multitude of ideas, you know, we have to understand that now we have to work together to create that peace. And what is that all about? What does religion teach? Oh, love thy neighbor, love yourself. Jesus Christ, Buddha, Zen, Muhammad, Krishna, Sitting Bull, Montezuma, Kukulkan, you know, all the spiritual elders, Gandhi, you know, even our own traditional people here. We have medicine people that taught one thing, was to love yourself, love the Mother Earth, and love your children and your grandparents, you know, the elders.
Understanding the cosmic time plan given by the sacred count of days for the Maya, we can understand the different levels of consciousness throughout the history of our galaxy and be part of our own evolution as co-creators with the divine. As the contours of the cosmic plan become clearer, human beings are presented with a choice as to whether to attempt the climb of the cosmic pyramid. Each one of us has to make this choice individually, and it may require that we turn many of our most cherished notions upside down. Each one of us is an autonomous child of the living universe. None of us needs any intercessor of any kind between ourselves and the divine. There can be no priest, no government, no artificial timing frequency like the Gregorian calendar and the church behind that.
My message is to look directly at the Mayan sources, you know, wherever those are to be found in the modern world. You know, modern shamans who are doing rituals of healing and reconnection and purification. You know, those are living traditions that human beings can connect with. The teachings of the Maya creation mythology, you know, the wisdom that's encoded on the carved monuments of Izapa. These things should be experienced directly by people who are seeking to understand what 2012 is about. And the spiritual teachings that are preserved in these traditions can be practiced directly by human beings today. So it's not so much about listening to what this person has to say or that person has to say. It's about plugging right in to the wisdom that's preserved in the Mayan traditions.
It is the nature of the enlightened human being to be totally free to live according to his or her choosing. With such a freedom and liberation from the cosmic plan, the future destiny of mankind is impossible to predict. We will be completely free to chart our own destiny. Humanity will live in true freedom, joy, peace, and love. We need to remember that we are brothers and sisters living in the same planet Earth. The Mayan calendar is a tool to understand each other. We all need real love, tolerance, respect, and understanding. The reason humanity has lost faith in the idea of a millennium of peace is that it has become blind to the existence of a cosmic plan, according to which our minds change. The road to peace is largely one of transforming our minds to a unitary, enlightened frame of consciousness, and by taking such a path, deepening our realization that we are all one. Spreading the knowledge about the cosmic time plan and the use of the sacred count of days of the Mayans are then also means of creating peace. If we do not understand time, and peace has not been attained at the completion of the great Mayan cycle, the human species on this planet will not have reached the level of consciousness it was meant to, and so it will probably destroy itself.
What has been my insight studying the Mayan calendar and their unique science of time, and meditating on the deeper quality of the spiritual significance of each day. Now I can see both the diversity and the unity of all religions and cultures. And I am thankful to the Creator to allow me to understand the interconnectedness of all beings in one heart, one people, and one earth.
According to the Mayan prophecies, humanity has always stood between two worlds, and the year 2012 is what all of creation has been waiting for, its very purpose. It is the end of an old era and the beginning of the new era. And according to this prophecy, it is when all things are brought together and all the conflicting ways of being, acting, and thinking will be resolved and unified in the light of awareness, which will make it possible for everyone to understand everyone else and everything at once. The completion of the great Mayan cycle may be seen as a gift from a divine source, since it is not only about creating balance, but also about enlightenment given to humankind as an expression of divine grace. This is when we will fully understand why the cosmic plan was designed the way it was by the Creator. At the same time, we will recognize our own divinity. We are all one. The universe, our galaxy, our planet, and all living manifestations, we all are under the same law of creation, and we are all synchronized to the energy changes described by the sacred calendar of the Mayans. Those who decide to get rid of the old world calendar will see the world stop. You will be able to say, "I saw the day when the earth stood still." That's what we need to do, to stop the old world, so we can all start living in a new time with a new world. Whether this world will end in a paradise or a catastrophe will not depend on the design of the cosmic plan, but on how many choose to make the climb to the new world consciousness. By study, by investigation, by direct experience, one can touch and recognize the nature of true enlightenment within oneself.
I think if we look at ourselves as a people, as one world, taking a viewpoint of the earth by itself in this vast darkness of space, we begin to understand that there are no boundaries. There's no languages or time that can separate us. The moment that is alive is the moment right now. And as we look at the earth as a whole, that is what it is, one whole human race. There's only one race, it's the human race. So we are on this beautiful gem that's in the vastness of space together. What we do to the earth affects everybody in the future, and it affects everybody on that planet. So I think this is the time of the prophecies, of a new beginnings of cycles that we're going to have to understand. We have to take care of what keeps us alive.
For those who will read and understand, it is a key to understand who we are and how we need to interrelate with each other.
My message for the people about the Mayan calendar is to expand your awareness so that you understand the interconnectedness of all beings.
There is the message that I want to forward is that for whatever has to do with spiritual evolution, then it is the Mayan calendar that holds the higher truth.
I think between the two worlds, we have to find that balance and that peace. As we go into the future, we can't forget the past. So just look at it. I mean, there's the scale, the balance, the yin and yang, the light and dark. We need to create that balance between the two.
So the core teaching is about right relationship with the true eternal self and how at the end of the age we can facilitate that reconnection in our own hearts.
Now the time has come. The stars, the times, the calendars, the prophecies are telling us we are the ones that we were waiting for.
When we decide to really change this moment in time, then we can unify our collective mind, our collective will, and our collective spirit in a new world. Then we have a chance. And certainly, the people of peace, love, unity, and compassion are awakening. Truly, the day of decision has come.
Tanat kaye o, bampane shunchira, shlach dichlale, yukenine, tanat kaye he. Jingle bene kira, kira global, kak chikel, bishketsutui. Ashin jingle bene kira chur pokomam, yukeshke popti, bishke ishi. Tanat kaye o, bampane shunchira, tur mikraye, bishtuk chilena. Ashin jingle bene kira shinkes kukemos, gari funas, bishke tiche. Ashin jing arbena nem talak betshol kashal, tur yakil ketnom, atter katulchol. Tanat kaye o, bampane shunchira, tur mikraye, bishtuk chilena. Tanat kaye o, tanat kaye na. Ma pechu mikraye, ma pechu shibetel, ma pechu pechur, ash la kahwin, takon pechukal, tur al